We've talked all about the Bills' problems entering this offseason, but what about the rest of the AFC? We'll explore that right now on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Locked On Bills is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Well, folks, welcome in. I'm excited for our conversation today because we are going to extend our view beyond the Bills. One thing that I've said frequently on this podcast is to encourage you to follow the rest of the league with the same scrutiny that you have the Bills, because you'd be pretty surprised at the issues that exist across the NFL. And so on today's episode, I want to consider the teams in the AFC that are in the division with the Bills, and then really the other contenders throughout the AFC, and consider what's new already for those teams. What type of resources do they have to improve their football team? And then what do they have to figure out this offseason? And so this will give us a good overall view of the conference as the offseason is really set to open next week. You're going to have player movement, and it will make you aware of the rest of the issues that exist and maybe some of the competing needs for the Bills and other teams and how they could be after some of the same players. So hopefully you will enjoy this conversation today. And so let's start with the Bills. I'll do this for the Bills first, and it'll give you an idea of how I'm going to discuss the other teams as well. So when it comes to the Buffalo Bills, the changes are pretty significant. There's a new head coach in Joe Brady. There's a new offensive coordinator in Pete Carmichael, and then Jim Leonard takes over as the defensive coordinator. The Bills are 27th in the NFL in cap space. They're over right now by $8.2 million, and that is according to overthecap.com as of the recording of this podcast. Every team has different maneuvers that they can make to create cap space, but not every team is willing to be very aggressive with how they do that. But by highlighting where these teams are right now, it gives us a good idea as to their starting point. As for draft capital, the Bills are 25th in draft capital. And so how do I get that number? Well, the picks in the draft have an assigned value to them. And there's different ways to get that value. There's different trade value charts that exist, but ultimately every pick has a numerical point value associated with it. And so if you add up the numerical point value associated with all the picks that the Bills have, it's 25th in the NFL. And I'll highlight that for every team as well. And so not a ton of cap space, not a ton of draft capital, but some things to figure out. The top 3 things for the Bills to figure out this offseason. Number 1, the wide receiver position. It has been a sore spot for the last few years. Keon Coleman hasn't become what this team needs him to be. They've had some free agent moves in Curtis Samuel and Joshua Palmer that haven't been what they're supposed to be, and the Bills are left looking for more wide receiver talent around Josh Allen. They also have to figure out their interior offensive line, starting center Connor McGovern, starting left guard David Edwards. They are expiring contracts. And then defensively, this team has a lot to sort out, as not only it transitions to a new scheme with a new coach in Jim Leonard, but even if they stayed the course with Sean McDermott, they had defensive needs to figure out. And so they need edge rush. They need a nose tackle. They need downhill linebacker. They need a safety. And so there's a lot to figure out on the defensive side of the football. All right, let's move past the Bills. Let's talk about the New England Patriots, who, of course, won the AFC last year. Their changes, they don't have any. The coordinators and head coach, they're all back. Their cap position, they're 10th in cap space with $39 million in cap space to work with right now. In terms of draft capital, they're 14th. Top 3 things to figure out for the New England Patriots. Number 1 is more help for Drake May. Obviously, this team reached the Super Bowl I think there's a strong case to be made that they absolutely overachieved. And Drake May had a great season. But ultimately, not enough on the offensive line, not enough at receiver. And so they'll be looking for answers in both departments. Number 2 is pass rush. They're hopeful probably to get a healthy Harold Landry, but that's kind of been hit or miss throughout the years. Arguably their best edge rusher, Caleb Chason, is an expiring contract. They got some good interior rushers in Barmore and Milton Williams, but they need more collective pass rush. And then lastly, they have quite a few expiring contracts on defense that are pretty significant. Jalen Hawkins, one of their starting safeties, he's an expiring contract. Caleb Chason, who had a career year as a young edge rusher, he's an expiring contract. And their nose tackle, Crisis Tonga, is an expiring contract. And that defense was different when he was available to them. He had an injury, he missed a little time, and you could tell when he wasn't on the field. So they've got some expiring contracts on defense to figure out, in addition to pass rush and finding more help for Drake May. Let's go to the Miami Dolphins. A lot of changes here. Probably the biggest organizational reset we've ever seen from the Miami Dolphins. They have a new general manager and John Eric Sullivan, who comes over from Green Bay. He was there for a couple decades, indoctrinated in the way of Green Bay, which is draft, develop, re-sign. Not a lot of activity in free agency, but occasionally a big splurge. Their head coach is Jeff Hafley, who was also part of the Packers the last couple of years as their defensive coordinator. Their offensive coordinator is Bobby Slowick, who was on their staff last year, most famous for his stint as the Houston Texans offensive coordinator during C.J. Stroud's first 2 seasons, and everybody loved him after that first season in Houston, and then nobody liked him after the second year in Houston, and he found himself as an assistant in Miami, and now he's their offensive coordinator. Their defensive coordinator is Sean Dugan, who is an extension of Jeff Hafley. Jeff Hafley will be the play caller on defense. So everything is new in Miami. Their cap position, they are 21st in available cap space. They're over right now by about $500,000. They've made several moves already in releasing Bradley Chubb and James Daniels and Tyreek Hill, and they got a lot more to do as well. In terms of draft capital, they're 6th highest, so they got some draft capital to work with. In terms of top 3 things to figure out for the Miami Dolphins, I think number 1 for them is getting cap healthy. This is a team that's getting out of some bad contracts. And between this year and next, I think they should aspire to really have their books clean and getting out of these deals like Tua, like they're going to get out of this Tyreek Hill deal, like they got out of the Brad Chubb deal. We'll see what they do with guys like Austin Jackson, but they got to get healthy with this salary cap. And they're going to take their medicine, and they need to. Number 2 is to find meaningful young talent. That's what has been missing from this team. They've traded away all their draft picks for players, and in most cases, it hasn't really turned into what they needed it to become at the expense of not being able to replenish their roster with young, meaningful talent. So this is their reset opportunity, and there's no high expectations for Miami. Take this opportunity to get your books right and find some meaningful young pieces that can form the new nucleus of the Miami Dolphins. And then number 3 is very similar to number 2. Find paths to more meaningful young talent. They're not going to find everything they need this year. And I think they need to have next year in mind as well as they make their choices. They're picking 11th in the draft. Is the player they're going to pick at number 11 exactly what they need, or should they trade back and get some 2027 draft capital? They need to be thinking about stockpiling assets to, of course, find their quarterback, but just generally find good young players to build their football team with as they transition and reset and expectations are low. All right, we will get to the Jets on the other side of it, in addition to some of the usual suspects in the AFC, like, of course, the Chiefs and Ravens. We'll do that here next. Folks, be sure to stick with me. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. March is a time to celebrate women, especially around International Women's Day, and to recognize just how much they carry at work, in relationships, and families, and in all the unseen roles they step into every single day. It's easy to celebrate that strength, but it's just as important to make space for their emotional well-being. And honestly, that goes for all of us. Think about my wife and how much she pours into our family, into our home, and how hard she works every single day to meet the needs of our household. and the roles we play, the expectations we carry, the pressure we don't always talk about. Well, therapy can help with all of that, creating balance, setting healthy boundaries, and supporting your overall well-being. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 6 million people served worldwide, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, and it works. Fill out a short questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and if it's not the right fit, switch at any time. Your emotional well-being matters. Find support and feel lighter in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, folks, let's continue this conversation. We'll get to the New York Jets right now. In terms of changes, quite a bit for a head coach in Aaron Glenn that is entering his second season. He fired a lot of people, including his offensive coordinator and his defensive coordinator. So now Frank Reich takes over as the offensive coordinator, and Brian Duker takes over as the defensive coordinator, but Aaron Glenn will be the defensive play caller. In fact, he said at the NFL Scouting Combine that calling plays is his superpower. And so that superpower will now infuse this Jets defense. We'll see how good he is at it. So new coordinators on both sides of the ball for the Jets in year 2 under Aaron Glenn. In terms of cap space, they got a bunch of it. Third highest in the NFL, $87 million in available cap space. In terms of draft capital, they've got the most. Number 1 in available draft capital, of course, when you trade away Sauce Gardner for 2 first-round picks, when you trade away Quinnen Williams for a 1 and a 2, and you stink and you're picking organically number 2 in the draft, well, you're going to have a lot of draft capital. So they got a lot to work with here entering year 2 of Aaron Glenn. They also have a lot to figure out. Number 1, I would say, is developing a passing offense. They got to find a quarterback, and they got to find some meaningful pass catchers. They have Garrett Wilson and Mason Taylor. Looks like a good young tight end, but that's about it. They need to fill out this room with pass catching talent and find a quarterback. That's a big task, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to find the quarterback this year. I don't think there's a really clear path to, for sure, young answer. Are they going to be the Malik Willis team? Are they going to draft Ty Simpson? We'll see where it goes. They pick number 2. That would be way high for Simpson, but they've got a passing game to build. Number 2 is they need to find a pass rush. Of course, they traded away Jermaine Johnson already for T'Vondre Sweat, but even if he was back, they need to find some pass rush talent. I don't think they have enough. They have Will McDonald, and that's about it. They need to find more when it comes to their pass rush. And then number 3 is to stay committed to the course. This is a team that is stripped it down, right? They trade away good young players. They got a lot of work to do. And I would be nervous if I were a Jets fan that they would try to accelerate this turnaround. And you can understand how you can have the urgency to do that, but there's no quick fixes coming. They need to get real about solutions at quarterback and in their skill players and on defense. And if I'm the Jets, you have to be careful not just to have an offseason where you're trying to get competitive next year. Your goal is to be good for a long time, stay the course, and don't get silly bringing in players that don't make sense for what you're trying to build. All right, so that's the AFC East. Let's move beyond the division and get into some other heavy hitters in the AFC. Next up is the Kansas City Chiefs. In terms of changes, it's really just the offensive coordinator. Matt Nagy's no longer their offensive coordinator. They brought back Eric Bieniemy, who, of course, has been part of some very good offenses in Kansas City. And so, obviously Andy Reid's the mainstay there, but Andy Reid's looked a lot better when he's had Eric Bieniemy compared to Matt Nagy the last couple of years. It's been a very average to below average the last couple of seasons in terms of their offense. In terms of cap space, they've got $6.6 million over the salary cap. They're 24th in terms of cap position right now, so they're not really brimming with cap space. And in terms of draft capital, they're 16th in available draft capital. Top 3 things for them to sort out, in my opinion. Number 1 is your quarterback depth. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes with a late season knee injury that's going to take some time to recover from. And I'm sure he's going to aspire to be ready for the beginning of the season. But obviously, making sure that he's fully rehabbed and ready to go needs to be most important. And I think having the right quarterback depth in place takes the pressure off of Patrick Mahomes coming back sooner than he needs to. And so who is it for them? Did they trade for Andy Dalton? Did they sign Marcus Mariota? Did they sign Geno Smith if he shakes free? How do you find the right answer to give yourself a chance to get by until Pat Mahomes is ready and give you the comfort and not having to force Patrick Mahomes back into the lineup sooner than he's ready to be? Number 2 is to solidify the offensive line and wide receiver spots. They need a right tackle. They're young on the left side. Do they believe Josh Simmons and Kingsley Su'Maati are the right left tackle and left guard? They got some things to figure out there, but they definitely need a starting right tackle, and they need more wide receiver help. I don't think Xavier Worthy is going to be their high volume target. Rashee Rice, it feels like that's a very dicey situation. Travis Kelce may or may not come back. They need more pass catching talent. And then lastly is pass rush. They really need to figure out their pass rush. They have a couple of recent picks in George Karlaftis and Felix Anduke-Uzomah invested there. Felix was pretty much out for the whole year last year. Karlaftis is a good kind of secondary player. He's a Robin, not a Batman. So I think they need to find some pass rush help as well, not to mention some other things defensively where, they got a starting safety in Brian Cook, starting corner in Jalen Watson, Leo Chenal. They got some big expiring contracts to sort out on that side of the football. So plenty for the Chiefs to sort out. Let's get to the Baltimore Ravens. They got a lot of changes as well. They fired their head coach, and so now they have a new head coach in Jesse Minter. They have a new offensive coordinator in Declan Doyle. I feel like that's a good hire. He was a guy that worked under Ben Johnson this past year with the Bears. And then the defensive coordinator is Anthony Weaver, and I think very highly of Anthony Weaver. And he's not even going to be the play caller. Jesse Minter, the defensive-minded head coach that was outstanding with the Chargers, he'll be their play caller on defense. In terms of cap position, they're 16th. They have $18.5 million in available cap space. In terms of draft capital, they're 8th highest in available draft capital. They got a lot to figure out. Number 1 for me is the interior offensive line. Tyler Linderbaum, their outstanding young center. He's set to be a free agent. Their right guard, Daniel Fa'alele, who I think is probably a below-average starter. He's an expiring contract. Their left guard and Andrew Voorhees is super upgradable. I think they need to invest quite a bit here into their interior offensive line. They also need pass rush in a big way. They traded away Odafe Owe. They have Mike Green, who didn't really show much as a rookie. Kyle Van Noy's in expiring contracts. What's going to happen with Nnamdi Madubuike? It doesn't sound like he's going to play again. They need a lot to figure out. They have a lot to figure out, when it comes to pass rush. I would also point to corner. They have Nate Wiggins and question marks, in my opinion. He needs a running mate. I don't know if TJ Tampa is going to be that guy. Chidobe Awuzie is an expiring contract, so they're going to need an answer at corner. And then there's this Lamar Jackson contract that feels like this is an important thing for them to figure out this offseason is to, not that his contract's going to expire, but is it in the right range? Does it make sense for both sides? I think there's a huge thing to figure out there, and it's not a team that is necessarily brimming with cap space. So quite a bit for Baltimore to sort out. Let's get to the Cincinnati Bengals. I know that they haven't made the playoffs like in 3 years, but with Joe Burrow, they are a team that I'm always going to be mindful of for how good they can be, because I think so highly of Joe Burrow, and defensively they've been a mess, but I still think of the Bengals as a team we have to respect in this conference because of their quarterback. They don't have any changes. Their head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator are all returning. Isn't that something? Zach Taylor, your longest tenured head coach in the AFC North in a division that once featured Harbaugh and Tomlin. It's crazy. Their cap position, they're 7th. They have $48 million in available cap space. Keep in mind, Cincinnati is not a team that pulls levers. They're not going to do anything to create a bunch of cap space with restructures or pushing money. That's just not who they are. In terms of draft capital, they're 18th. Top 3 things to figure out are really all defensive things. They're bringing back their entire offensive line. They have Chase Brown and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Like, their offense is okay. Defensively, they have stuff to figure out. And obviously, on the defensive line, Trey Hendrickson, expiring contract, don't expect him to return. Joseph Asai, who's been a good young defensive end, he's an expiring contract. But overall, like, they got to get better. They got to get better there. At linebacker, they just drafted 2 guys, Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight. Both struggled as rookies. You got to have the right read there because you don't want to just count on them if they're not going to be answers. So they got to figure out linebacker. They got a safety spot to sort out with Geno Stone as an expiring contract. Their slot position is one that will need to be addressed. So I guess the good thing for Cincinnati is that they're set on offense and they can really focus their efforts on the defensive side of the football, but they need to be right, and they need quite a bit. All right, coming up next, I have other teams, other contenders in the AFC that I want to cover, including the Texans, Jaguars, and Broncos. We'll do that here next. Folks, be sure to stick with me.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
All right, folks, welcome back. Let's get into a few more teams here in the AFC as we try to paint a picture of what's going on across this conference as things are going to be happening here in the coming days. All right, let's talk about the Houston Texans next. In terms of changes, there are none. They're bringing back their coordinators, their head coach. In terms of cap space, they're tight. They're 26th in cap space, over by $8 million. They're 11th in draft capital. Top three things to figure out. I could probably say offensive line for all three. This has been quite the process for Houston in getting this offensive line figured out, and I don't think they're any closer. They trade away Titus Howard. They trade away Juice Scruggs. They got some young players they've drafted that have looked shaky. They got a ton to figure out all over this offensive line. It's been a multi-year project that they need some players to develop is what they need, and they got to find some real answers here this offseason. It is paramount to what's going to happen. CJ Stroud is not a quarterback that's, a guy that's going to be able to overcome a bad offensive line, is a guy that tends to hold the football a little bit himself. They got a lot to figure out at defensive tackle. Both of their starters, Sheldon Rankins and Tim Settle, are expiring contracts. They got a good-looking young player in Tommy Togiai that if I were a Texans fan, I'd be pretty excited about. But it's pretty much him, and they need to find more for that interior defensive line rotation. And then I would say overall defensive depth. They've got some good young players that are going to be expensive to keep. And it would behoove them to bolster their depth. That way they can be choosy and have some succession plans in place. But that's very much third to multiple spots on the offensive line, maybe three. Your defensive tackle tandem, and then you want to get some more depth on defensive. Excuse me. Let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. They have no changes, bringing back their OC and their DC. Their cap position is tight. They're 29th in cap space. They're over right now by $17 million. Their draft capital, they're 22nd in draft capital. Of course, they trade away their first-round pick to get Travis Hunter. Top three things to figure out. Well, Jacksonville is a team with some big-time expiring contracts. Starting running back Travis Etienne, starting linebacker Devin Lloyd, starting corner Greg Newsome, Monteric Brown, who's also a starter for them at corner, is an expiring contract. I would say Etienne, Lloyd, and Newsome will probably get some decent money. And as we just went through, they're third lowest in cap space. And they got to figure out not only if they want to pay those players, how they're going to pay those players, and what the succession plan is. I would look at running back and feel like they have a couple of guys they drafted in Bashal Tutin and LaQuint Allen. They're probably okay, but I don't see a linebacker in the pipeline. And I'm sure their corner equation probably includes Travis Hunter, but that's a guy coming off of an ACL tear. And I think they want to be aggressive with how they play defense, and that's going to require good corners. Number two is Brian Thomas Jr. I think they got to figure out exactly what they want to do here. If I'm Jacksonville, and I'm not saying this because I am sitting here yearning for the Bills to trade for Brian Thomas Jr., but he was their fifth option in the passing game once they brought over Jacoby Myers. They got Parker Washington and Brenton Strange. Is this a player that makes sense for them to not trade, especially when they're sitting here not necessarily loaded with assets? I'd be thinking about how I could flip Brian Thomas Jr., especially since he was not drafted by this coach or this general manager. You can't just keep him and him be your fifth option in the passing game. And that's kind of where I think he is. And then lastly, Travis Hunter's return. You have a lot invested in Travis Hunter, 2 first-round picks. And you tried to do this thing where you're going to play him at receiver and corner. And I think that took away from him being overly effective at either. He's obviously very dynamic, but now he's coming off of an injury. Figure out the right plan, which has always been, he's a full-time corner that sometimes plays offense. I mean, that's what he's got to do. It's crazy to me that that's not the overall idea. But they got to make sure that they figure out Travis Hunter's return because they have a ton invested in that player. Let's talk about the Denver Broncos. Their only changes at offensive coordinator, Davis Webb, now their offensive coordinator and play caller. Their cap position, they're 14th with $25 million in available space. In terms of draft capital, they're 24th. Top 3 things to figure out for Denver is linebacker number 1 for me. Alex Singleton, their starting Mike, and Justin Sternad, who's been a key reserve and third linebacker, are both expiring contracts, leaving just Dre Greenlaw, who's had a ton of injury issues. So they want to make sure they get that sorted out. I think running back's a big one for them. They don't really have a downhill back. They were a lot better to me when J.K. Dobbins was available. Do they want to bring him back? He's certainly had a lot of injury stuff throughout the years. I think they're looking for a downhill hammer. They tried to trade for David Montgomery. So I think they're going to be wanting to find a downhill player to go with R.J. Harvey. And then they invested in Evan Ingram, but I don't think he quite gave them what they were hoping for in terms of that joker tight end, which is a very important position in a Sean Payton offense. So I still think they could be searching for that type of player. The last team I want to talk about is the Chargers. In terms of changes, both coordinators here, they fired Greg Roman at offensive coordinator, and then the defensive coordinator, Jesse Minter, is now the head coach of the Ravens. So their new offensive coordinator is former Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel, and their defensive coordinator is Chris O'Leary, who is a Jesse Minter disciple coming over to, for them, hopefully take over the defense in a seamless way. In terms of cap position, they are in good shape. They have $84 million in cap space, 4th most in the NFL. In terms of draft capital, they're 28th. Now, they got some things to figure out, but if I was a Chargers fan, I'd be pretty excited about the cap space that I had combined with some really good young players. But top 3 things to figure out. Number 1 is the interior offensive line. Of course, one of the big stories with the Chargers last year was that both tackles, Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, were basically gone for the year. But those guys are coming back, but now you have a ton of questions on the inside where Zion Johnson's an expiring contract, Andre James, Bradley Bozeman, Trevor Penning, Jamari Sawyer. Those are all either starters or important players. Plus, Mekhi Becton really didn't look good. So they have a lot to figure out. They might need 3 new starters on that interior offensive line. I think they need to find some running back depth. Of course, Marion Hampton, their first-round pick, will be a huge part of the mix. But Mike McDaniel, he wants to have a complementary player that has speed, which has always been the case with Mike McDaniel going back to the 49ers, whether that was Raheem Mostert, or of course Devon Achane and what he's meant in Miami. So they need their lightning to go with the thunder that they have in Omarion Hampton. And then pass rush. I would probably put pass rush above running back depth, to be honest with you, where Odafe Owe and Khalil Mack are both expiring contracts. They got a good-looking young pass rusher in Tuli Tuipulotu, but they need to have a couple more guys, and the couple more guys they had are expiring contracts. And so they have some things to figure out, but the good news for the Chargers is that they have the 4th most cap space in the NFL. So there you have it, folks. Zoom out on the entire AFC as we start to get excited for next week. And now we're aware of what's going on with the rest of the conference and not just the Bills. Maybe there's some teams you wish I talked about, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis. I don't know. Those teams don't really strike me as contenders. That's what I really wanted to focus on. The division, of course, and then contending teams. And I think Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, those are middle-class AFC teams that I didn't include, to be honest with you. So there you have it. As far as programming goes here, I'm looking forward to Friday. Friday's going to be when I drop my mock off season. where I go through and I do all the things, right? Like create cap space, I sign players, I do a draft, we'll do a roster projection. It's a big thing, and it'll be a 2-part deal because I can't do it all in one show. So it'll be a double drop on Friday. So stay tuned for that. And then we'll have some things in between, of course, Bill Squad on Thursday, a couple conversations with me and Jerry Ostrowski along the way, but be aware that that's coming on Friday. It'll be a double drop. I'll drop them at the exact same time. But you want to make sure you listen to them in the right order, or else it might not make sense. But that's coming on Friday, so keep a lookout for that. And then, of course, next week, it's here, the new league year, player movement. It will be fun. We'll be covering it all here for you on Locked On Bills. So don't miss anything. Make sure you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.